It's that time again. We're back with another episode of Critical History. Last time out, we talked about the birth of socialism and communism, and paradoxically, the birth of republicanism and nationalism. And before that, we had taken a look at the largest conflict in 17th century Europe, the 30 Years' War. Today, we will take a quick look at the precursors to and the outcomes of the Age of Exploration and the Italian Wars. What were the Italian Wars? Well, it was almost 70 years of near continuous warfare, taking place in the Italian peninsula from 1494 to 1559. If you watched the last video, you know that Italy wasn't even unified into a single state by 1848, so it certainly wasn't a country in its own right at the onset of the Italian Wars. We'll take a closer look at what Italy looked like at that time in a minute, but first I want to lay the groundwork for the Italian Wars and from what context we will be examining it. The topic first piqued my interest because I wanted to know why, after Columbus's discovery of the New World, there wasn't more intense interest in conquering and/or colonizing it. After all, Columbus, Vespucci, Cabot all made voyages of discovery at this time. But as we learned from our series on the 30 Years' War, it was not until the early 17th century that colonization efforts by England and France, not to mention Sweden, specifically picked up. Even the precursor to the 13 colonies, the Roanoke colony, was not established until 1585. 90 years after Columbus's discovery. Now, of course, that is not to say that Portugal and Spain weren't busy with colonization efforts, as the first Brazilian colonies were founded in 1500, and the Spanish wars against the Aztecs, Incans, and Mayans all happened contemporaneously with the Italian Wars. But if the Italian Wars are intertwined with the Age of Exploration and discovery of the New World, what sparked the Age of Exploration to begin with? And while I'm sure there are numerous reasons, the top of the list would have to be the 1453 conquest of Constantinople. If there's anything that deserves its own video, it's the Great Ottoman Siege of 1453. But the short version is, with the capture of the most prominent city in Europe, considered to lie at the center of the world, the Ottomans, the Great Order, and Muscovy, between them, controlled all the east-west trade routes, and with it, the trade of silks, furs, and spices, namely black pepper. Now, usually I would make you buy my book, Conquest of Truth, to find out this kind of info, but I'm feeling generous. The reason silk was so valuable in those days was not because it was comfortable or impressed the ladies. It was because it was almost a necessity for a soldier. Because it turns out that if you're wearing silk, when you're struck with an arrow, the arrowhead is much easier to remove. This in a time when as many soldiers died from infected wounds as died in battle. So in the same way the chainmail was mandatory to protect a soldier from being slashed and cut, a silk shirt protected a soldier, or at least made him less afraid of arrows. And while salt and sugar were scarce in the West, but still available, all pepper had to come from the East. So while the Portuguese set off to the south in hopes of finding a route around Africa, the Spanish enlisted the help of Columbus and veteran Basque soldiers to find a route they hoped was shorter by sailing west. What does all this have to do with the Italian Wars? Well, that brings me to the infamous Treaty of Tordesillas. This treaty, sanctioned and drawn up by the Pope, broadly divided the non-Christian world and assigned everything to the east of the designated meridian to Portugal and everything west to Castile. This treaty is why Brazil to this day speaks Portuguese, while the rest of Latin America and the Philippines speak or spoke Spanish. So with the Ottomans firmly in control of the Eastern Mediterranean as well as the Near East, and everything beyond the Pillars of Hercules divvied up between Portugal and Spain, you can see why everyone was fighting over control of the Italian peninsula. Those interested in alternate histories might want to ponder this. If there's ever been a treaty where you could benefit greatly from rubbing out no more than a word or two and replacing it with Castile and Portugal, this would be it. What is interesting to me is that we know the Vikings reached the New World before Columbus. There are rumors of French, Welsh, Irish, and Basque sailors reaching the New World before 1492 as well. We also know Columbus was not his birth name. Based on the reactions of the Aztecs upon meeting the Spaniards, it seems they had encountered Europeans before. Quetzalcoatl, the feathered serpent, to me, that sounds like the description of a bearded man wearing scaled armor or possibly chainmail. Now, I've mentioned the work of Anatoly Fomenko a number of times on this channel, and one of his ideas was that it's possible that either the Russians or the Ottomans, or both, may have arrived in the New World at the same time or slightly before Columbus. And yes, I know how crazy that sounds, especially the first time you hear it. But bear in mind, the Ottomans were the dominant navy in the Mediterranean at this time, and they were not surpassed in terms of naval strength until the Battle of Lepanto in 1571. A fair question to ask, perhaps, would be, why does it matter? And in response, I would suggest that if it helps to resolve so-called unsolved mysteries, then it's of great importance. And on the other hand, it's good to get into a habit of always thinking critically about history. So let me list off a few facts. The name Cristobal Colon. What does it mean? Cristobal means Christ bearer, and Colon, although there are different interpretations, is the same root as the word colony, colonist, and colonizer. So really, the first explorer to bring Christianity to the New World just happened to be named the Christ-bearing colonist? Seems more likely it was a title given to him after the fact. Then there is Hernan Cortes. His name apparently means gentle traveler, and Cortes again has different interpretations, but one of them is that Cortes and courteous are related. So Cortes is the courteous, gentle traveler? We're going to be stacking the coincidences pretty high today. So the Pope, Pope Innocent VIII, who died in July 1492 before Columbus is said to have left on his first voyage, on his tombstone there is a mysterious inscription which reads, "During his pontificate, the glory of the discovery of a new world." And one last one. Do you know the name of the first settlement that was established in the New World on the mainland? Don't worry, I didn't either. It's a city by the name of Cumana in northern Venezuela. This is supposedly named after the Cumana Goto tribe. I'll let you make up your own mind if that's significant or not. There's a lot more to cover on this topic, considering we've barely touched the Italian Wars at all, but I will leave you with one last bit of information. The King of France, who invaded the Italian peninsula to begin the Italian Wars, was Charles VIII. Well, after some success, he returned to France, if only barely, but then died at the age of just 28. Now get a load of this. The official story of how he died? Supposedly he died by hitting his head on a door lintel. If I wrote that in a book, would anyone find that remotely believable? I doubt it. That about does it for this episode. Remember to hit the like, smash the subscribe, hit the bell for notifications, check out my book about the Holy Roman Empire in the early 1300s and the development of the first gunpowder weapons, Conquest of Truth. The link is in the description. And tune in next time as we continue to look at the Age of Exploration and the Italian Wars. Until then, you know what to do. Stay critical.